So, thank you for all the positive vibes and feedback on episode 1 of Therapeutic Thoughts. There was enough interest that I'm going to do an episode 2. So, today, what I want to talk about is the idea of change and taking risks that help facilitate or evoke change in people's lives. You know, a lot of individuals are afraid of taking risks, and part of the justification for that risk-aversive kind of a philosophy is that if I don't take a risk, I'm going to avoid any further loss or further suffering or further regret. I call this kind of the Monopoly syndrome. Have you ever played Monopoly? One of the things that we've seen and we sometimes see in that game is, people end up going to jail. And then they have to, find different ways to get out of jail by rolling the dice and so forth. The one thing that is interesting about being in jail is that if you're not doing well in the game, you don't have a lot of properties, and you're going to land on other people's property, and then you're just going to lose more money or have to mortgage some of your properties in order to pay the rent or the utilities or someone's railway, that all of a sudden becomes not such a bad place to be. Because if I'm in jail, I'm not going to have to worry about landing on anybody's property and paying money that maybe I don't have. That's why sometimes people will be on, like, for Atlantic Garden, and they're rolling their dice, and they're just hoping they get that roll on the dice that will let them go to that diagonal where it says go directly to jail, and you don't pass go and you don't collect 200, because it's like, at least I don't have to worry about that last leg of the game and ending up on, Park Place or a boardwalk where you got to pay obnoxious amounts of money and then you're out of the game. So the idea here is that at least if I'm in jail, I'm still in the game. And what people fail to realize is that along that last leg of the board, there are several safe places, right? But they hyper focus on all those motels that somebody has on a property and thinks, oh my gosh, they imagine the worst case scenario. They predict that the worst case scenario is going to happen to them. And often that's in life, like when people have anxiety. Anxiety is about imagining the worst case scenario, but there's this secondary belief, and it's whatever that worst case scenario is, I'm not going to be able to handle it. And so sometimes people, even though they want to change, they're risk avoidant, and that risk paralyzes them from making choices that could result in opportunities and growth. One of the assumptions a lot of people that are risk aversive make is that if I don't take any risks, great, I'm going to avoid, anything bad happening. But there's a huge assumption in that philosophy, and the assumption is this: not taking risks is a risk in and of itself, and that's what they miss. And so, for example, if I don't take a risk, I'm risking having to live with regret. I'm risking maybe losing out or forfeiting an opportunity for growth or learning or discovering something new. And so people that don't take risks, that's not necessarily a safe place to be. They're like, well, nothing bad's going to happen if I don't take a risk. Well, again, my response to that is not taking a risk is a risk. So you are risk taking. And I would rather, make decisions than avoid decision making, because a lot of times when we don't make decisions and we're complacent in our lives, we get to a place where decisions are going to be made for us. And then we don't have any choice about the outcome of how those decisions play out. So a long time ago, Dr. Robert Leahy, who was a pretty prominent cognitive therapist, talked about this whole pattern of avoiding risks, and he called it strategic self-limitation. And it's this idea that although some people are all about change and taking the risks that are associated with change, sometimes people, their priority is avoiding risks. And so they specifically do things to inhibit or avoid taking the risks that could promote growth and change. They self-handicap themselves, or as Dr. Leahy said, it's strategic self-limitation. They may kind of remain in a victim place, a hopelessness place. They may get angry at people that try to nudge them in the direction of change. And what I would say is to be contemplative about this in our own lives and to think about, what are the fears that we have about change? Certainly, there's this idea of further loss, further suffering, further regret. I understand that. And people are afraid of those. They're afraid of uncertainty. But I think you're much better off to take risks that you carefully think about and you contemplate, and take that risk of trying, realizing that not taking a risk is a risk in and of itself. And it's better to make decisions in our lives than to have decisions be made for us, which is what will happen if we go through life being apathetic or complacent about the things that we want to do or the directions that we want to go. So that is my therapeutic thought for the day, and I hope everybody has a super duper week.